My name is Emily, and for 8 years I believed love could survive anything. I believed honesty was stronger than temptation, and family was the one place where your heart was always safe. I spent years praying for a child while trusting the two people I loved most, never imagining they had already built a secret that would destroy my life. Looking back now, I can still remember how ordinary everything seemed before the truth surfaced. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive with loud arguments or obvious lies. Sometimes it grows quietly inside your own home while you're too busy hoping for a miracle to notice. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to stay with me until the very end. The truth that came out during my mother-in-law's birthday celebration changed every relationship in our family forever. It wasn't revenge driven by anger or shouting. It was something much quieter and somehow much more unforgettable. 8 years earlier, I had married the man I thought would grow old beside me. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of person everyone admired. He worked as a financial analyst for a local company, never missed birthdays, and always knew exactly what to say around relatives. We lived in a comfortable suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, in a modest 2-story home with white shutters and a maple tree that turned brilliant shades of orange every fall. From the outside, our life looked almost perfect. Every Saturday morning we drank coffee together on our back porch while birds chirped from the nearby trees. We talked about vacations we wanted to take, restaurants we wanted to try, and the children we hoped would someday fill the empty bedrooms upstairs. Those dreams felt so real that I could almost hear little footsteps running through the hallway. Then came the doctor's appointments. At first, everyone told us not to worry. We were still young, they said. These things sometimes took time. I believed them because I wanted to. Every negative pregnancy test felt disappointing, but I convinced myself the next month would be different. Months became years. Our calendar slowly filled with appointments at fertility clinics instead of weekend getaways. Blood tests, hormone treatments, ultrasounds, procedures, consultations, second opinions. I lost count somewhere along the way. The waiting rooms always smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh coffee, and every visit seemed to end with another hopeful promise that never became reality. Each failed treatment chipped away at a small piece of me. I smiled when friends announced pregnancies. I bought baby shower gifts. I held newborns and congratulated growing families. Then I came home, closed the bedroom door, and cried until my chest hurt. Daniel would usually wrap his arms around me and whisper that everything would be okay. I believed him because I needed someone to believe. As the years passed, though, something inside him began to change. It wasn't immediate. There wasn't one dramatic moment when I suddenly realized my husband had become distant. Instead, it happened so gradually that I kept making excuses for him. He worked longer hours. He answered fewer questions. He spent more evenings staring silently at his phone while the television played in the background. Whenever I asked if everything was all right, he smiled politely and blamed stress at work. "I'll be fine," he'd say, and I wanted so badly to trust those words. The person who helped me through those difficult years was my younger sister, Rachel. Rachel had always been the cheerful one in our family. She laughed easily, remembered everyone's birthday, and somehow knew exactly when to show up with takeout or fresh flowers after another disappointing doctor's appointment. She lived only 20 minutes away, so she visited often. Sometimes she'd sit beside me on the living room couch while rain tapped softly against the windows. We'd watch old movies, bake cookies, or simply drink tea without talking very much. She never pushed me to stay positive. She just stayed beside me until the sadness became easier to carry. I often told people I didn't know how I would have survived those years without her. Daniel seemed grateful for her support too. Whenever Rachel visited, he always greeted her warmly. The three of us ate dinner together, laughed over old family stories, and pretended life was normal. Looking back, I realized those evenings should have comforted me. Instead, they slowly became something I would eventually replay over and over in my mind. At the time, though, I noticed only tiny things. Sometimes I walked into the kitchen, and their conversation stopped a second too quickly. Occasionally, they exchanged a look that disappeared before I fully understood it. Rachel would laugh at jokes Daniel never repeated aloud. Once or twice I found them standing unusually close while talking on the back porch. None of it seemed important. Families spend time together. Sisters become friends with their brothers-in-law. That's what I kept telling myself. There were also small moments that made even less sense. Daniel suddenly became protective of his phone. If I reached for it to check the weather, he'd casually take it back first. When messages arrived, he'd flip the screen downward before reading them. If I asked why he seemed distracted, he'd sigh and remind me how much pressure work had become. Eventually, I stopped asking. Both of our families continued encouraging us not to lose hope. Every holiday someone mentioned adoption, another fertility specialist, or simply having more faith. Their intentions were kind, but every suggestion reminded me of what I still didn't have. Daniel's mother, Carol, always hugged me warmly when we visited. She never openly criticized me, yet every so often she'd make comments that lingered long after dinner ended. "I just hope Daniel gets to experience fatherhood someday," she'd say with a gentle smile. Or she'd quietly mention how wonderful grandchildren would be for the whole family. She never directly blamed me. She didn't have to. I blamed myself enough for everyone. Some nights I lay awake listening to the steady hum of the air conditioner while Daniel slept peacefully beside me. I wondered if he secretly regretted marrying me. I wondered whether another woman could have given him the family I couldn't. Those thoughts slowly became part of my daily life. I apologized too often. I smiled too much. I carried guilt that wasn't mine to carry. The lonelier I felt, the harder I worked to keep our marriage together. I planned date nights, cooked his favorite meals, and tried to convince myself that love was simply going through a difficult season. Everyone around me seemed completely normal. Friends posted happy family photos online. Relatives talked excitedly about birthdays and school plays. Even inside my own house, nothing looked broken. And then one quiet evening, Daniel walked through the front door with an expression I had never seen before. He asked me to sit down because, according to him, he had life-changing news to share. Daniel stood in the living room with his hands clasped together, so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The late afternoon sunlight spilled through the blinds, leaving thin golden lines across the hardwood floor. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, but everything else felt strangely silent. He looked at me for several long seconds before speaking. "There isn't an easy way to say this." My stomach tightened. "I've become a father." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. After everything we had endured together, my mind searched for another explanation. Maybe he meant a relative had asked him to become a guardian. Maybe someone in the family needed help. Then he quietly added two words that changed my entire life. "They're twins." The room seemed to shrink around me. I stared at him without blinking, waiting for him to smile and admit it was some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, he lowered his eyes. I could barely force the next question from my lips. "Who's their mother?" He inhaled slowly, almost as if he had rehearsed the answer. "Rachel, my little sister." The name echoed inside my head until it stopped sounding like a real word. My chest felt hollow, and my hands became cold despite the warmth filling the house. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't screaming or crying. I simply couldn't understand what I had just heard. Daniel reached toward me, but I instinctively stepped backward. He began talking quickly, explaining everything before I could ask another question. He said the relationship had never been planned. He said they had grown close while supporting each other through my infertility. He insisted they never meant to hurt me. Then came the sentence that hurt more than anything else. "We wanted children, Emily. After so many years, we honestly believed you were never going to become a mother." Every word landed like another weight pressing against my chest. Not once did he apologize for betraying my trust. Instead, he spoke as though their decision had been practical, even compassionate. As though my heartbreak had simply become an unfortunate consequence of solving a difficult problem. Rachel arrived less than an hour later. She looked exhausted, avoiding my eyes as she stood near the doorway with her purse still hanging from one shoulder. She never denied what had happened. She never tried to explain her own choices. She let Daniel speak for both of them while she quietly wiped tears from her face. I searched desperately for the sister who had comforted me after doctor's appointments. The sister who had promised we would get through everything together. She was gone, or maybe she had never truly existed. Days later, both families gathered to discuss what everyone kept calling the situation. No one raised their voice. No one accused anyone directly. Instead, they spoke softly, choosing careful words that somehow hurt even more. Several relatives reminded me the babies were innocent. They encouraged me to forgive everyone for the sake of the twins. Some suggested that perhaps this unusual family arrangement could somehow work. Others insisted life was simply complicated and that holding on to anger would only create more pain. I listened quietly. No one asked what forgiving them would cost me. No one asked how many nights I had cried believing my body had failed my marriage. The only surprising person in the room was Daniel's mother. Carol remained unusually quiet throughout the conversation. She rarely defended her son. Whenever someone suggested I should simply move forward, she looked down at her hands instead of agreeing. Her silence spoke louder than everyone else's opinions. For the first time since learning the truth, I realized something important. She looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. That observation stayed with me long after everyone went home. I never argued. I never demanded explanations. I never threw anything or called anyone names. Instead, I quietly began protecting myself. The following week, I scheduled a private meeting with a respected divorce attorney across town. His office overlooked a small park where children played beneath bright green trees. Watching them through the window hurt, but it also reminded me why I needed to think clearly instead of emotionally. The attorney advised me to gather every financial record I could find before making any decisions public. So I did. Each evening, while Daniel believed I was reading in the bedroom, I carefully reviewed years of bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, insurance paperwork, and credit card records. At first, everything appeared ordinary. Then the patterns began appearing. Monthly transfers to an unfamiliar account, hotel charges during supposed business trips, jewelry purchases I had never received, furniture deliveries to an address I didn't recognize, medical expenses connected to another insurance policy. Each document quietly answered questions I hadn't even known to ask. This hadn't been one terrible mistake. It had been a carefully hidden second life. The records stretched back years, long before our final fertility treatments, long before Rachel had started spending so much time comforting me. The affair had already become part of their lives, while I still believed they were helping me survive mine. My attorney encouraged patience. Evidence mattered more than emotion. So I stayed patient. Whenever Rachel or Daniel sent messages, I saved them. I backed up photographs. I organized financial records into neatly labeled folders. I printed emails. I documented dates, locations, transfers, and timelines. The more information I collected, the clearer everything became. They hadn't confessed because guilt finally overwhelmed them. They confessed because hiding the twins had become impossible. They had already planned their future. I had simply been the last person invited to learn about it. Several weeks later, my attorney placed divorce papers across his polished wooden desk. My hands trembled slightly as I signed every page. With each signature, I felt less like someone losing a marriage and more like someone reclaiming herself. When everything was complete, I slipped the documents into a large envelope. I didn't file them immediately. There was still something I needed to do first. Life continued strangely after that. I attended Sunday dinners. I smiled politely during family gatherings. I congratulated distant relatives on birthdays and anniversaries. Everyone seemed confused by my calm behavior. Some probably believed I had accepted the situation. Others assumed I was too broken to react. Neither assumption was correct. I was simply waiting. Then an elegant cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. Daniel's mother was hosting her birthday celebration the following Saturday. The entire family would be there. Every single person. I looked at the invitation for a long time before quietly placing it on the kitchen table. Without saying a word to anyone, I opened my desk drawer, removed the signed divorce papers, slipped them carefully into my purse, locked the front door behind me, and prepared to attend Carol's birthday party. Did I can't help write or optimize a fictional story in a way that presents it as a real first-person confession or true story. If you'd like to present it as fiction, here's the ending section written as a fictional drama. When I arrived at Carol's birthday party, the house looked exactly the way it always had during family celebrations. Balloons floated above the dining table, the smell of freshly baked food filled the air, and relatives chatted as though nothing had changed. People smiled politely at me, expecting the quiet, heartbroken woman who would eventually accept the new reality. I smiled back, just enough to avoid suspicion. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to embarrass anyone. I was there because everyone deserved to hear the same truth at the same time. I greeted relatives, accepted a glass of iced tea, and waited. One by one, every member of both families arrived. My parents, Daniel's cousins, Rachel. Finally, Daniel walked through the front door carrying one of the twins while pretending everything was normal. Only after everyone had gathered in the living room did I quietly stand. The conversation slowly faded. I walked toward Daniel, reached into my purse, and placed a sealed envelope into his hands. "I've already signed the divorce papers," I said calmly. No shouting, no accusations, only silence. Daniel stared at the envelope without opening it. Several relatives looked confused, believing that was the entire reason I had come. It wasn't. I placed another folder on the coffee table. Inside were copies of financial statements, transaction histories, photographs, and dates organized in chronological order. I explained that the affair had not started recently. It had begun years earlier, long before anyone claimed they had simply grown close, long before our final fertility treatments, long before Rachel became the sister who comforted me after every disappointing doctor's appointment. Page after page showed hotel reservations during supposed business conferences, transfers from our joint account paid rent, and expenses connected to the hidden relationship. Receipts matched dates. Daniel claimed he had been working late. The timeline left no room for misunderstanding. Every document quietly confirmed what excuses never could. Then I revealed something even harder to hear. During several fertility appointments, Rachel had already known she was involved with my husband. She had sat beside me while doctors discussed our future. She had hugged me when treatments failed. She had looked me in the eyes and promised everything would be okay, all while protecting a secret that had already changed my life. No one interrupted. No one needed to. The evidence spoke more clearly than anger ever could. Daniel tried explaining that everything had become complicated. He insisted they never intended to hurt me. He repeated that they had only wanted children. But every sentence sounded smaller than the documents lying on the table. Facts have a way of removing emotion from deception. Rachel finally looked around the room. For the first time, she realized everyone understood the full story. There were no missing pieces left to defend. No carefully chosen version of events remained. Only the truth. Carol slowly sat down without saying a word. The color drained from her face as she turned each page. I wasn't exposing a single mistake. I was revealing years of choices, years of warning signs that had been ignored because believing the truth would have been uncomfortable. Several relatives who had encouraged me to forgive everyone quietly apologized. They admitted they had assumed I was reacting emotionally instead of seeing the entire picture. Now they understood I had been manipulated while believing the people closest to me were protecting me. That moment wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply clarity. I never wanted revenge built on humiliation. I wanted accountability built on truth. Waiting had allowed every lie to collapse beneath its own weight. After that evening, the legal process moved forward exactly as my attorney had prepared. The divorce was finalized. My financial future was protected because every important document had already been gathered before emotions could complicate the process. For the first time in years, I wasn't living according to someone else's decisions. I began creating a quieter life. I redecorated my home. I traveled with friends. I found joy in ordinary mornings that no longer carried constant disappointment. Healing didn't happen overnight. Some wounds never disappear completely, but they do become lighter to carry. I've learned that betrayal from strangers is painful. Betrayal from family reaches places inside your heart you never knew existed. Even so, refusing to become bitter is its own kind of freedom. Looking back, I don't regret staying silent for as long as I did. Silence gave me time to understand the truth. Patience gave me the chance to protect myself. And facts accomplished what anger never could. Sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest one. Sometimes it's allowing the truth to arrive exactly when no one can deny it. If this story reminded you that self-respect is worth protecting, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? And what helped you move forward? If you enjoy emotional fictional stories about resilience, justice, and finding strength after heartbreak, please subscribe and join me for the next story. And wherever you are today, remember this. Walking away from people who repeatedly betray your trust isn't weakness. It's choosing a future where your peace matters just as much as your love.